Redditors who have found a dead body. How did it happen and what did you do? This happened my freshman year of high school in 2016. I lived pretty close to the school and my first period teacher would always be there earlier than everyone else. And his class was on the far side of the school, so I would hang out in there before class started. Well, anyway, we had a sub that day, so I figured I might as well walk to the nearby Arsenio's for a breakfast burrito. More side stuff to add. In October we had a big upcoming football game with a rival school and they would constantly prank each other, and some would go too far, such as taking off the metal shop teacher's tires at one point. As I'm walking through the foggy field, I see something hanging from a tree and my naive self thought it was just some little prank since we didn't have many suicide or murder cases where I lived. Well, I got a little closer to check it out and I was hit with a sour smell. Got even closer out of curiosity and sure as hell it was a dead body. I called the police and they held me in the office all day after that and would randomly call me up throughout the years to check on me. Edit. Minor detail and fix. Did they find out who that person was? I assumed it was the first period teacher. Yes. My aunt was actually friends with the guy's mom and I don't know how to say it without being rude, but he wasn't all there. He had apparently did that because his girlfriend had left. Hi monsieur, he graduated 2 years ago. But from our rival high school, my friends and I were swimming at the beach, bouncing along with the waves. A big wave lifted me up, and when I came down my foot went through what felt like a bag full of sticks or something. And something stabbed me in the ankle. I didn't want to reach down and find out what it was, so I told the lifeguard what had happened. Sometime and some phone calls later, the police arrived. There was a body in a weighted bag just offshore. When my foot came down, it broke through the bag and through the person's rib cage, which is what stabbed me. The lifeguard had already put a band-aid over where I had been bleeding. But when we found out what caused it, I freaked out at the idea I was going to get an infection. So I went over to the first aid station and asked what I should do. And they suggested I put a serious tag on it. You son of a bitch, you did it. Well done. When I was 19, a friend and I went for a hike to an abandoned bridge over a river to fish. We parked the car in a field and started walking along the edge of the field to get to the path. There was a car parked about halfway up with the trunk open. When we approached, I could see a guy lying on the ground. As we got closer, there was a shotgun on the ground, and upon closer inspection, most of the top half of his head was gone. We ran to the car and drove to the neighboring farmhouse and called the police. We ended up sitting in the field telling the same story over and over as various police showed up. Apparently the guy had been missing a few days and they were looking for Hi Monsieur. It was a boy becomes man kinda day. I was 3 or 4 years old and I found my dad dead. The only real thing I remember is me trying to wake him up to get me cereal and then going to tell me, Mom, he won't wake up. Everything after that is blank. I'm so sorry. No need to be sorry. It's probably better that he died. He used to beat my mom and rape my sister. The only thing I regret is that I'm the one that found him, because I now have intense fear of death and paranoia that may or may not have been caused by that experience. Okay. At first I was like, poor man, left his family behind. Now I'm like, okay, Satan called for you. Leave. Sorry if I offend you. Not exactly a dead body, but hear me out. Went to the local skate park when I was younger and some friends were sitting there all silent. I asked what was up and they told me earlier that morning, around 2 a.m., that someone got executed by the big tree in front of the park. We went around to the spot where it happened, and all this dirt was displaced, presumably because of the coroner and evidence field technicians. We concluded that they had missed a few spots when we found fragments of the person's head scattered around. I found a big chunk of skin from behind the ear, with some hair still attached. On the inside there was also a little piece of skull cradling a little squiggle of brain matter. I can still see it now as I type this out. Greater than I can still see it now as I type this out. Because it's in a jar on your desk. You know what's fucked up about this comment? It's that someone actually did decide to keep it. This weird squatter couple who basically lived in the woods around there. I am not kidding. They were the ones who heard the shot and investigated, leading them to the body. WTAF. Playing in woods with some friends and found a dead guy laying up against a tree. Poked him with a stick to make sure he was dead. I was 10, what do you expect? Then hauled ass to get someone's parents. Poke. Leave your dick out of this. Y'all wanna see a dead body? There has been a few instances of me finding bodies considering I volunteered with my local PD for a few years and would go on patrol in uniform. Most of them were heroin odds or natural cause deaths. While there were certainly a few homicides too, I would not consider most of those as finding the bodies as they are generally called in. With that said, the most notable discovery for me was when we got a call for a homeless man sleeping in a bush on private property. When we got there, we found the man and it turns out he wasn't homeless and definitely wasn't sleeping. The man had 2 knives in his back and was long dead. We found out it was a single assailant who did this and not sure why he used 2 knives. The ignorant bliss of the person who thought he was sleeping. Maybe the killer used 2 knives because he didn't know if just one would do the job right away. Fair point. Though generally if one stab doesn't do the job, you pull the knife out and stab the person a second time. I found my roommate dead in our living room. I called 911. And I guess based on what I told the operator about how he looked. Cold, bluish, not moving, vomit coming out of his mouth and nose. They didn't ask me to do CPR. After I called 911 I called his wife, who is my sister's best friend and was camping with her that weekend. They were 2 hours away. I just sat next to his body and cried until the police, EMTs, firemen got there. One of the firemen had to kind of snap me out of it because I was in shock. Then there was weirdness because they didn't understand why I lived with the married couple and was home alone with him. I guess they've both been my friends a long time. I knew them for 8 or 9 years. They had a 2-year-old and needed money. I needed a place to stay so I rented their basement. But the police seemed to think it was very suspicious. Anyway, the worst part was waiting for his wife to get home and then watching her cry over his dead body. Not a good day. I'm glad her and their daughter weren't there to find him instead. Though, he was 38 years old. That's why I use that number in my username. I'm sorry you had to find your friend like that and I hope you're doing okay now. Thank you. I am doing well. Luckily I already had PTSD so this just added a little extra onto that, haha. I have seen many deaths as a volunteer firefighter, but the only one I found was late at night with young kids drinking and driving. My partner and I stopped next to what is left of the wreckage and I opened the door. There was one of the kids laid out on the twisted car. We found out later his girlfriend was the one in the middle of the road wanting to die. Shitting hell. Any idea what happened to her after? And how do you cope with that kind of stuff? Not up, but a lot of fire districts have debriefing sessions throughout the next few days after rough calls. They're not usually mandatory because you can't make anyone go, but they're highly recommended. Sorry about not putting a serious tag. I had no idea what it was and I'm extremely new to Reddit. Thanks for at least pointing it out. In my second year of university, I went on a trip with a couple friends to a nearby island city for a few days. On the second to last day we were there, we went to a beautiful but crowded beach. We clambered down a rocky cliff to try and find a more secluded spot where we could chill and take some photos. When we got down there we saw an abandoned canvas bag full of stuff really close to the water that was starting to get splashed by the waves. We went to bring it up a little higher on the rocks just in case someone came back for it later. As we got closer, my friend jokingly said to me, "Hey, Don't those rocks under the water kind of look like a mannequin? I agreed, but thought it was just a product of the murkiness of the water and some colorful rocks. My friend took a snap with his phone and sent it to some people with the caption, "We found a body," which was wholeheartedly intended to be a joke. It quickly became apparent to us that his caption was completely accurate. As we got down to the water and saw the unmistakable details of sneaker treads and a Nike baseball hat on by a fully clothed thin white man face down, only about a foot below the water, we immediately panicked and ran all the way back to the top of the cliff. As my friend called the cops, we turned around to see that they were already there in the parking lot. We waved them over. We were still kind of doubting that it was real, but as soon as the officers that went to check it out came back, they blankly said, "Yup, that's a body." They took us to the police station and got our statements, then gave us a free ride downtown. We looked in the news over the next couple of days to see if we could figure out the story behind this, and we actually did find an article about a murder-suicide. The man we found was the suicide, saying that the body was found by police. My friend was floored by this and called the reporter to tell her that the body was actually found by tourists, and, to our surprise, she actually changed it to reflect our efforts. I still ponder how this man could have killed himself to have ended up in the position that he did. Drugs? Auto-asphyxiation? I may never know, but it is still the most eerie and unsettling thing I've seen to date. Was in the hospital visiting my granddad on a ward full of elderly patients. Went to use the bathroom on the ward and opened the door to find an old man sat on the floor, looking down. I told the nurse so that she could go check on him. Turns out he was actually dead. He had been in there for around 20 minutes before I found him. My husband found a dead body on the side of the road. He was on his way to a hiking spot, so he was on a pretty quiet road past any towns. There was a porta-potty on the side of the road and he needed to pee. So he stopped. There was a car parked there, but he didn't think much of it, assuming they had parked and hiked or something. Except on his way out of the porta-potty, when he had the passenger side of the car in his line of vision, there was a man lying just behind the rear passenger tire that he hadn't been able to see before. The car had been backed in and was backed against a dirt slope, small hill, and he was kind of between the dirt slope and the rear wheel. My husband called out to him a few times, realized he wasn't moving or making any sounds, in spite of it raining, and immediately called 911. He declined to be walked through CPR efforts by the dispatcher, as he could tell the guy had passed away. No movement whatsoever, and one of his eyes had come out, and the dispatcher said they'd send someone out as soon as they could. Someone from the sheriff's office arrived 2 hours later. My husband told them what he saw, signed a statement saying as much, and that was it. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.